Hello everyone, Dr. John Bartemus here today to talk to you about a very important topic regarding our health and nutrition. Today I'll be discussing the topic of GMO food, or genetically modified organism food. That's what GMO stands for if you were not in the know. Now I want to dig into what are GMOs, how are they made, and are they safe? So basically, the four most common genetically modified foods in our society today are corn, soy, rice, and wheat. But corn and soy by far are the most common foods that you're going to be exposed to in a genetically modified fashion. It is close to 100% of all corn and all soy in our society today are genetically modified. So if you're buying corn or soy, you want to look for an emblem on the side or on the distributor that says non-GMO verified, so you can be sure that that is actually natural corn or natural soy. Otherwise you're eating genetically modified corn and soy, and that may be bad. We'll dig into why as we go. So how are GMOs made? GMOs, or genetically modified organisms, are made by taking the DNA of the corn basically and combining it with the DNA of a virus so that the virus can carry in a desired trait to the corn to help the corn, say, yield more bushels per acre or more heads per stalk, etc. So depending on the plant, they're going to use a piece of viral DNA, splice that into the corn DNA to help increase yield. And people have raised concerns about what if the viral DNA combines with our DNA after we eat that corn or that soy. What kind of troubles and issues can that cause? So that is a huge topic, and one that Monsanto and other companies that are creating genetically modified organisms have not been overly helpful in answering, and have not been overly excited to do the studies to help answer that question. Now, why would you create a genetically modified organism? Because it is illegal to patent a natural product. So no one can go out there and patent an apple, right? Because that is from nature, nature created. It's illegal to go patent that. But in 1980, the Supreme Court passed a law that said companies were allowed to patent seeds and novel seeds. So by creating a genetically modified seed, that isn't from nature, that was produced in a lab, and that is patentable because that was made by man. So it behooves Monsanto to have genetically modified organism seeds of all varieties, because then they can control the food supply. They can make it so the seeds can't reproduce the next year, so farmers are always going back to them and dependent on them to purchase seeds year after year. And also, if there's two farmers whose farms are side by side, and this farmer plants genetically modified seeds in his farm, but this farmer uses natural seeds, if the seed from the GMO farm blows over into the field of the farmer that's not using GMO seeds and grows, and GMO finds out, they can sue this farmer for stealing and using their products without purchasing from them. And so this has opened a whole Pandora's box of legal issues, monopoly issues, and many other issues. For more on that, check out Food Inc. and other movies. Now, what about the safety of GMOs? That is a question that has not been answered to date, and that's really what you would think would be answered first before spread to the US population and the world population. And since it has not been answered adequately, many nations around the world are denying or turning away genetically modified crops that come over by the boatload from the US. So there have been articles published online recently that said China has turned away 3 ships from the US that were bringing GMO corn, GMO soy, and GMO products. So if these other countries are denying the food and making it illegal and labeling the food, why is the US not labeling it, not studying its safety, and promoting it to the population as if it were safe? Finances, probably, but let's look at it. So, safety, let's look at GMO corn. Today we're going to look at a study from the Journal of Food and Chemical Toxicology. And the title of it is called Long-Term Toxicity of a Roundup Herbicide in a Roundup-Tolerant Genetically Modified Corn. So basically the corn that they studied in this study is not only a GMO corn, but it's a GMO corn that is also tolerant to Roundup, meaning you can spray the whole field with Roundup and everything in the field will die except the corn because it's tolerant to the Roundup. Is that good to eat? Monsanto says it's okay because they've done 90-day studies with rats, and they said the toxicity was tolerable, basically. But what they found at the end of the 90 days was there were signs of toxicity in the liver and the kidneys of the rats. But because rats live for 2 years, that's not considered a long-term study, that's a short-term study. So a long-term study has never been done until this 2012 study here that we'll go over today. But first, so Monsanto did the studies, they did 90-day studies on rats, found liver and kidney toxicity, but said, hey, no big deal, let's keep moving forward. There are currently no mandatory testing of genetically modified organism foods or pesticides. So Monsanto can put out any foods they want, use any herbicide or pesticide they want, without rehash or without having to prove the safety of it, and that is dangerous. Now, there are set maximum residual levels, so Roundup is the most common pesticide used in the world, okay? So there are set maximum residual levels of Roundup that are allowed to be in our drinking water, in the runoff from farms, etc. And those are established. Those levels also set the level of how much Roundup we should be allowed to consume in a day. Now you say, we shouldn't be consuming any Roundup, and I agree with you, but because it's used so widely, if we tested you today, you would test positive for Roundup in your blood, because it is in our drinking water, it is everywhere. Now, this study looks at, like I said, this is the first long-term study to look at the impacts of genetically modified foods and of Roundup. And so what they did is they looked at rats for 2 years. And during that 2 years, they did 11 different blood tests and urine samples on each and every rat in the study. So over a 2-year period, they were testing them 11 times in blood and urine to see how is it changing their blood profile, how is it changing their metabolism, is there cancer, this. So we'll get into that. Now, there were 3 groups in the study. There was a GMO corn group that was not treated with Roundup, but it was a Roundup-tolerant corn. There was a GMO corn group that was treated with Roundup on top, and then there was a no corn group, but that got Roundup in their drinking water. And the levels of Roundup in the drinking water were 1,000 times lower than the maximum residual level that's allowed by government agencies. So they're feeding these rats 1,000 times lower levels of Roundup in their drinking water than we are exposed to as a maximum rate. And the control groups ate a corn diet that was the closest non-GMO form of corn to this GMO form. The diets consisted of either 11, 22, or 33% GMO corn or GMO plus Roundup corn. Okay? So let's dig in and see what we found. The results are pretty amazing. And what we're going to see is that the average lifespan of a rat is 2 years. So the control group rats, the male rats lived an average of 624 days. Alright, the female rats lived an average of 701 days. And the standard deviation there was plus or minus 20 days each way. So 2 years is 730 days. So those rats were living a normal rat life. Now, the study group rats was different, as you'll find. So, mortality results. Up to 50% of males and 70% of the females in the groups that ate GMO corn died over the 2-year period. It is noteworthy that the first 2 male rats that died in both GMO-treated groups had to be euthanized due to kidney tumors that were over 25% of their body weight. So in order to be humane to the rats, if the tumors that they developed became more than 25% of their body weight, they euthanized the rats. So the first 2 rats that died had kidney tumors that grew to be over 25% of their body weight and had to be euthanized. In the females, there were 2 to 3 times more deaths in all treated groups compared to controls by the end of the experiment, and they all died earlier than the control group in general. So lifespans were shortened and they died of tumors. Excuse me. Tumors began to reach a large size on an average of 94 days in treated females and up to 600 days earlier in the male groups that were eating GMO corn versus the control groups if they developed tumors at all. Large tumor size caused impediments to either breathing or nutrition and digestion because of thoracic and abdominal location. So the tumors got so big that they couldn't breathe and they couldn't eat or digest their food. Beginning in the 24th month, up to 80% of the female rats developed tumors in all the treatment groups, and up to 3 tumors per animal. The most common tumor in the female rats was mammary tumors or breast cancer in the female rats. Secondary, the second most common tumor was a pituitary tumor. In the males, the most common damage was liver and kidney damage. The same trend was observed in groups receiving Roundup in their drinking water. So the rats that ate GMO corn that was tolerant to Roundup and rats that ate GMO corn treated with Roundup, up to 80% of them developed tumors. The same trend was observed in groups receiving only Roundup and not the corn. So is it okay to be drinking Roundup in our drinking water? Absolutely not. For all Roundup treatment groups, 80% of animals presented 2.5 times more abnormal than the control groups. The most affected organs in male were liver and kidneys, as we stated. And right now I'm going to flash in a picture of 3 mice with breast tumors or with breast cancer that they developed from the corn. So check this out. You'll also see the tumors dissected out of them on the side, and you'll see their kidney and livers as well. Alright, so here we are with pictures of 3 mice with mammary tumors or breast cancer growing from the GMO corn, as well as the cancerous tumors dissected out of them, and then you can see their sick kidneys up here and their livers with nodules over there. Alright, we're back. Now, let's read this statement here. Moreover, in females, the androgen-estrogen balance in blood was modified by GMO corn and Roundup treatments, and for male animals at the highest Roundup treatment dose, levels of estrogens more than doubled. So what is that saying? That is saying that GMO corn and Roundup are endocrine disruptors. And you've probably heard of BPA in plastics. That's also an endocrine disruptor. And what endocrine disruptors do is they jack up the levels of insulin in your, they jack up the levels of estrogen in your blood, which makes females very, very prone to breast cancer and makes males go towards a female status. So you've seen man boobs in public. You've seen various diseases that are high estrogen, low testosterone in men. It can lead to metabolic disease and other diseases. So both Roundup and GMO corn are endocrine disruptors. Should we be eating them? Now I got a little bit more to read to you, but these are very important statements, so please listen. Our data show that, as is often the case for hormonal diseases, most observed effects in this study were not proportional to the dose of the treatment. Meaning, the animals that ate 11% GMO diet had just as bad of results in had just as many tumors show up as the groups that ate 33% GMOs in the diet. So once you're eating it, you're at risk of just as bad whether you're eating a little bit or a lot. Similar degrees of pathological symptoms were noticed in this study to occur from the lowest to the highest doses, like I said there. This corresponds to levels likely to arise from consumption or environmental exposure to Roundup that can be seen in contaminated drinking tap waters and which fall within authorized limits. So what that says is the level that we have in our drinking water is higher than the level they were feeding these rats, and these rats were developing tumors at a rate that was amazing. So we're drinking up to 1,000 times more contaminated water with Roundup than the rats were. What are we going to see? Cancer has been on a rise, hasn't it? The lifespan of the control group animals corresponded to the normal rat lifespan. So the control group lived a normal life, the GMO corn rats and the Roundup rats did not. All treatments in both sexes enhanced large tumor incidence by up to 3 times. So eating the GMOs and drinking the Roundup gave them up to a 300% chance more of cancer or tumors. The majority of tumors were observed after a year and a half. So Monsanto's studies were 90 days and they said, oh, it's safe, let's give it to them. But this says right here the majority of tumors did not show up until after a year and a half. So those studies were not doing safety justice because they didn't carry on long enough to really see what would happen. The first large detectable tumors occurred at 4 months in males and 7 months in females. Again, 4 months is 120 days. Monsanto cut off their studies at 90 days, giving us false sense of security and safety. We observed a strikingly marked induction of mammary tumors by Roundup alone, a major formulated pesticide, even at the very lowest dose administered. So even without eating GMO, just having Roundup in your drinking water was causing a strikingly marked induction of breast cancer. Interestingly, in the groups of animals fed GMO corn without Roundup applied to it, similar effects with respect to enhanced tumor incidence and mortality were observed. So what that says is GMO corn alone, without spraying Roundup on it, was causing tumors at the same rate as ingesting and drinking Roundup. So if Roundup isn't safe, if it's not safe to eat and drink a pesticide, which seems pretty obvious, the GMOs are creating the tumors at the same rate as the pesticide. So should we be eating these? Absolutely not. We need to get on board and get political about labeling our foods, about outlawing GMO foods. And that's going to be tough because Monsanto pays a lot of money to the government to be able to do these things. Lastly, death in male rats was mostly due to the development of severe liver and kidney insufficiencies, confirming the first signs of toxicity observed in the 90-day feeding trials done by Monsanto. So Monsanto only did 90-day trials, but they still had signs of liver and kidney toxicity, brushed that under the rug, said it's safe, and continued with business as usual. So what these authors say here is, also one last pearl, is in the present investigation, deeper analysis at an ultrastructural level, so at a cellular level, revealed evidence of impediments in transcription and other defects in cell nuclear structure that were comparable in both sexes and dose-dependent in liver. So basically what this is saying is that all treatment groups, GMO with Roundup, and Roundup drinking water, all had changes at the cellular level or at the DNA level. So basically these things are going down to a DNA level and causing mutations and causing metabolic dysfunctions that lead to cancer and lead to disease and lead to death. In conclusion, it was previously known that glyphosate consumption in water above authorized limits may provoke liver and kidney failures. So the EPA says, here's the level of safe drinking water levels of Roundup. Anything above this is going to cause liver and kidney failure. The results of this study clearly demonstrate that lower levels of complete agricultural Roundup herbicide formulations at concentrations well below the officially set safety limits induce severe hormone-dependent breast, liver, and kidney disturbances. This study represents the first detailed documentation of long-term deleterious effects arising from the consumption of GMO, Roundup-tolerant corn, and of Roundup, the most used herbicide in the world. So what they're saying is this is the first documented study of it, what we could kind of intuit is true. GMOs are not safe. The amount of pesticides, particularly Roundup, that we're spraying each and every day on our grasses, on our foods, all over the world, is not safe. We need to lower this, and we need to push for more safety studies and more regulation of GMOs, of Monsanto, of pesticides. And what you can do on an individual level is look for that non-GMO verified sticker on the foods you buy, so you can make sure that you're not eating your way toward cancer and an early death. I'm Dr. John Bartemus, and I'm here to help you fulfill your full potential for life by getting you to 80, 90, 100 and beyond, by teaching you what you can do from a lifestyle standpoint to keep you healthy. Have a great day.